Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now, in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Our guest today is Steve Hunegs, the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council for Minnesota and the Dakotas. It's great to see you, Steve. I think we met about 10 years ago.
Richard, we have history, absolutely. We've met, and I've always been impressed and thankful for your work and your leadership at Or Emet Synagogue, and thank you for everything that you do for the community. It's always a pleasure to participate in Access to Democracy. Avi, thank you. Alan, Sharon, it's a great group, and I don't like one dimension very much. I'm looking forward when we'll all be together in person, hopefully before long, right?
Hear, hear. No, I mean, I was very grateful and very impressed by your staff, and as far as how well organized these briefings for the Jewish community were on safety issues. And I know there's been great progress, but there's so much going on immediately, as we talk. There's the horrific thing in Atlanta, which you got a statement out about virtually immediately. But why don't we start off, say a bit about JCRC for the benefit of people who maybe haven't heard you before. Go ahead, thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Operating premise that for our community, Jewish community, of course, we embrace the larger community. In some ways, things have never been better to be an American Jew in this country, this wonderful, marvelous democracy that we have. We're not without our faults, believe me, some of whom are manifest. But if you look at just about any measurement of life or pursuit of happiness, ADL measurements, for instance, anti-Semitism practically is at an all-time low. Nevertheless, there are some measurements, and we can discuss this within the ADL evaluation, which spike at certain points. That said, as you correctly point out, Richard, we've seen spasms of violence directed against many groups, including Jews, which are very worrisome. The most violent attack against American Jews in history at Tree of Life Synagogue in October 2018, for instance, right? So we've seen both, as Dickens might say, the best of times and the worst of times. But let me give you a little bit of background about the JCRC to your wonderful viewership too. And I don't want this to be a monologue because, of course, it's great. Oh, it's great to talk with you, Richard, and not at you, Richard, and everybody else. But a little bit of background.
Good.
Here, I'll hold this up to the extent that people can see it. We're 3 states: Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. As I like to say, 225,000 square miles of paradise, and a number of important facets of our mission. civil rights. Let's talk about some, right off the bat, we're talking about what's happened to the Asian American community throughout the United States, and in particular, this heinous, murderous outrage in Atlanta. Very important. Community security, as you mentioned. We like to say, particularly given our birth in 1938, we live at the crossroads of civil rights and community security. Israel advocacy is very important from an upper Midwest perspective. Holocaust education. We also hold the portfolio for lobbying on behalf of our community, particularly our social service agencies. Pardon me, we're at the home at the Hunegs Robin Studios. There are dogs barking and kids and things like that, too, during these COVID times, and phones ringing on top of everything else. But we hold the portfolio representing our Jewish social service agencies, Jewish Family Service, Jewish Family and Children's Service on the Minneapolis side, who serve oftentimes primarily the non-Jewish community. So we have this, you might say, myriad of very sometimes disparate activities, but hopefully with a through line of trying to make the community better, the greater community and the Jewish community, because this is, after all, the great kaleidoscope of America is all of us working together. So that's a little bit of overview. If you take each of those, might say cones, each has its own network of relationships, right? In the press. So we're very much outreach. After all, we're called Relations, JCRC of Minnesota and the Dakotas. I love my job because I get a chance to meet wonderful people throughout the 3 states. And I have to say, the vast majority of people with whom we meet and interact are very supportive and very warm and just represent the best of our country. And it's always reassuring when I think about that, especially in these times. So that's a little bit about what we do. Happy to talk more about specifics. Richard, glad that over the years we've had a chance to work together. And I have one of the great jobs representing one of the wonderful organizations, and I have the most marvelous colleagues. And get this, we've been together for almost 100 years in aggregate, and there's only about 8 of us or 9 of us. So I have colleagues who are tremendous professionals, and we've worked together year over year, year after year.
You've touched on the outreach that JCRC does to other communities, and that's one of the things that really impressed me when I learned that you provide when it comes to community security, for example, you've provided your expertise, or you've helped connect other communities with expertise when it comes to ways of making different minority communities safer and more secure.
Yeah. First of all, it's a Mobius strip, community security, right? If a community is unsafe, if a community is attacked, it impacts all of us. So there's a pragmatic approach, but the right thing to do, the Leviticus, right? Do unto others what you have them do to you, is all about helping other people. And that's part of our faith that undergirds everything that we do. It's represented in Islam and Christianity and Judaism, just the importance, in all religions, the importance of doing things to help each other. As you say, Richard, yes, African-American community, Hindu community, Muslim community. And many times we've come together to advocate at the state capitol for community security concerns. Sometimes we provide assistance. Sadly, in a way, our community has developed sort of an expertise in community security, given what we've faced in our history. Let's look at it more positively, though, that we have expertise and experience and resources to share. And it always makes me think a little bit of like Lend-Lease, 1940 in the United States, wanting to assist Great Britain at its time of most awful peril. And let's provide, as FDR said, provide that fire hose to your neighbor, right, at the time of emergency. But let's hope that the fire hose is something that we can use to plant and grow and cultivate and the like too.
In terms of outreach to others, I love the highest statement, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which has been around a long time, and which I think is another model of Jewish organizations that punch above their weight, that have tremendous positive impact, even though they might, like JCRC, you have a small staff, but you do big work and you help others do big and important work. I love the highest statement when it comes to outreach. In the beginning, we helped refugees because they were Jews. Now we help refugees because we are Jews. I think that's a beautiful statement. I just absolutely love that.
that reminds me of the Talmudic expression from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Elders, that it's not our job to perfect the world, but we can't desist from the effort, right? Every person that we help, like highest, every person that we help find a better life, sort of brings the even in a secular way, it helps sort of bring the divine age closer to us when everybody's sort of working together.
Right.
I'm glad you mentioned highest for another reason, because I can brag on our former board member, Bob Aronson, who is the national president, global for that matter, because of course they have global reach, and how proud that we have a Minnesotan who's reached the top volunteer position within highest. Bob just gave at Adath Yeshurun last Saturday the Devar Torah about refugees and highest. Well, keep in mind too, Richard, that the attack on Tree of Life Synagogue, Bowers, was motivated in his sick mind because he had heard that the synagogue had hosted a highest event, and that
Right.
he wanted to go murder Jews because he believed that organizations such as Highest and the Jewish community who were assisting refugees, that this was sort of an evil plot to displace white Americans. I mean, that's the crudest way. I mean, that's the way I can express it in this crude thought. And so, keep that in mind too. But as I always say, looking at the positive, that you're right, between 1881 and 1920, the institution of restrictive immigration quotas to the United States, something like 2 million Jews came from Eastern Europe to live in the United States. So we owe so much to this country for the safeguards and security and opportunities that it's provided. We also owe others who are also in need the opportunity to come here and strengthen our country. We've done programs with the Federal Reserve, with Neil Kashkari and the Urban League, the Minnesota Business Partnership, and we've discussed the importance of immigration. It's the right thing to do. We all agree upon that. We can stipulate to that. But it strengthens our country economically. It strengthens Minnesota economically when people come here to live and contribute their talents and their abilities, right?
It's interesting. You've gotten, our younger daughter-in-law is Asian and lives in San Francisco. And they're a little afraid. Her parents were boat people escaping Vietnam. And they came here. I mean, this is one of the things, as an anthropologist and a social scientist, one of the things I talked with my students about and asked them, mostly these kids with German heritage and was at the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay. Sorry to mention that word. Okay, but
no football game right now.
One of the things that became very clear, and a lot of these white kids came to really understand at a very deep and personal level, because they knew how hard their grandparents worked as the first immigrants to come to the country. And oftentimes, like my daughter-in-law's parents, they escaped in 76 from Vietnam. When they came here, they scraped and worked hard and had 2 and 3 jobs, and they started a little shop. And nobody worked harder than they did. And so that, the enterprise, if we love enterprise in this country, there are so many examples of how enterprising our newest immigrants are. And then if you look at, say, the Lower East Side in New York, which is kind of iconic when it comes to the story of Jewish immigration in this country. It's all fascinating. But and if you want to comment any more on this, please. But could you share some of JCRC's current initiatives, the kinds of things you're working on right now, and we'll kind of stay in this affirmative, proactive kind of mode about things?
Just to go back, you mentioned the Vietnamese people and the boat people in that time. One of the few countries in the world to actually accept, outside the United States, Vietnamese people was Israel. In 1975, 1976. And of course, the Israel story is the absorption of more people per capita, immigration-wise, in practically any country in the history of the globe, for that matter. We just had an interesting program talking about JCRC programming with Daniel Ashheim, who is Israel's consul for public affairs out of Chicago, and Or Danieli, who is Israel's second in command of their Ethiopia embassy. And this is one of a positive side effect of the pandemic is the ability to organize now these Zoom programs. And we had Or in Addis Ababa and Daniel in Chicago. And Daniel was formerly posted to to West Africa, to Dakar, or in Ethiopia, and they discussed their respective experiences in Africa. It's particularly the interesting stories of Ethiopia and Israel helping with locust eradication, Ethiopia and the aliyah of the Ethiopian Jews to Israel, and Dakar and Israel trying to help Dakar, just rich in resources and the like, with some of its agricultural issues and well as its high-tech issues, and what Israel is bringing to the world. A great story of what immigration can mean and what assistance to other countries can mean. But back to your question, Richard, there are just a lot of different pieces. And again, this is a testament to our wonderful community as well as to our outstanding staff. Some things to think about, for instance, let's go back to what we were talking about. We have a great program coming up, a somber subject, but important subject about Japanese Americans and World War II and their internment, right? A gentleman named Sam Mahara, whose family was at the camp in northern Wyoming, Heart Mountain. Thank you. It took me a second to think of it. In his experiences, and of course, this relates directly to what we've seen, and that is these vicious, terrible murders in Atlanta, being in some ways an ongoing reflection of the discrimination Asian Americans have faced in the United States, right? And this gives us an opportunity, Sam Mahara, to learn more about it as a community in partnership with Minnesota State University, Mankato, and Allianz insurance company, who's also supporting us in the endeavor in the Japanese American Citizenship League, too. So we can all learn the stories of what happened when our country went badly wrong in World War II, and then the shame of the Korematsu Supreme Court decision in 1944,
Yes.
which upheld the Japanese internment. That was an ironic decision because it applied what was called strict scrutiny because, of course, going back to a footnote in the 1938 case called Caroline Products, in which it was said that if you're going to designate people by race, but for some sort of regulation, ordinance, or statute, strict scrutiny needed to be applied. And in this case, strict scrutiny was applied and nevertheless was upheld. Well, years later, the intelligence that was provided, that was the undergirding of the Japanese internment, was found to be completely false. In fact, they even knew at the time, the Office of Naval Intelligence at the time concluded that the Japanese Americans posed no threat to the United States. In fact, the opposite was true, as we saw in the 442nd, in the bravery of the Japanese Americans in World War II. It's just a long way of saying there's so much that we need to know, so much that we need to learn from our history, and it's so applicable to now that we're proud to have these wonderful community partners in which to present in Minnesota State, Mankato, and part of Greater Minnesota. So it's all for the good. We have a kinder transport exhibit coming up starting in July, and here's why I have a smile on my face. I have a smile on my face right now because the planning is for much of this to be in person, maybe all of it to be in person, because we're in a way hoping, but of course paying close attention to the science and what it is the governor will permit, that by that time, July, and the accelerating rate of vaccination in Minnesota and hopefully ongoing safety, we can gather distance with all the appropriate precautions, but actually see each other. Kinder transport was an effort primarily by the British to allow 10,000 Austrian and German Jewish children to enter the country. And for the most part, it's a rare Holocaust story with a happy ending. These children were saved. Of course, 10,000, small number in the million Jewish children that were murdered in the Holocaust. But it's a remarkable story. American Swedish Institute, great friend, wonderful generosity, is hosting the exhibit. A number of children in the kinder transport went to Sweden, too. Yes. That's what brings the Sweden in. So it's the JCRC Bethel Synagogue, ASI, and we have a gentleman in our midst, Mr. Black, who was on the kinder transport. So here he is, 94 or 95 years old, or what he is, and he's going to be telling his story, videotaped last fall outside as part of it. Brings tears to your eyes to think about the story. They were remarkably poignant stories that underlie this. Oftentimes a family that was chosen for the kinder transport had to make a decision. Maybe they could send one child. Which child do you send? Yep. Right. And it goes from there too. So, very pleased that we're going to have this opportunity outside.
Speaking of poignant and moving things, I'm sure you saw that wonderful video where elderly alumni of that program gathered in a theater, and there was one of the movers and shakers in the effort, who was even more elderly, was sitting in the front row.
Well, Sir
And
Nicholas Winton lived to 105 years old.
Sir Nicholas Winton. It is an
Yes.
absolutely fabulous thing to see. Speaking of things that are uplifting and positive in a world where we see, real ugliness from time to time. But the spirit of JCRC, you guys don't let yourselves get down in the face of these kinds of things.
No, I mean, speaking of Nicholas Winton, you keep prompting so many good thoughts. You're a great interviewer. See, there you have it. His son is coming.
I make random associations.
Well, you and I both, so we're good together. His son is coming. Nicholas Winton's son, who tells the father's story. In fact, stay tuned for further details along those lines. But to your point, during this fall campaign and the difficulties of the fall campaign, my dear friend Stephen Belton, who's the president CEO of the Urban League Twin Cities, and myself, Judge Lejeune Lang, retired judge, and Jacob Milton, we wrote a piece about what it means to be, sort of exercise and live responsibly within a democracy. Peace in America depends on each of us. I just happen to have it with me. The Basilica, which is our neighbor downtown, is such a dear friend of our community. We've actually worked with them on their security. They've hosted our Transfer of Memory exhibit. This issue happens to contain information about the Holocaust oratorio that dates back to 1985 and the 40th anniversary of the 2005. And the 60th anniversary of the end of the war, which there now will be again produced by the Basilica, which was a remarkable effort back in 2005, and now here we are 16 years later again. And they're our neighbor, and the Archbishop Hebda is a dear friend of our community. So like I say, our work is most often characterized by friendship and hard work. From time to time we have to intervene in difficult situations. There's no question, but
the mutuality between JCRC and these other communities is a story. I'm not sure that the wider community knows that much about that role of JCRC.
Which is why I love the opportunity. Alan over the years has been so gracious and sharing to host, and we've, Alan likes to nudge me a little bit here and there, and and we have great discussions and friendly debates on the program. But he's one of the greatest, and all you have to do is look. Anthony, I know it's a significant anniversary of the show this last year or so. The legion, the legacy of guests that he's had over the years from all corners of the state and all realms of life, and say thank you, Alan, and thank you for everybody that's done such a great job on the show.
He loves to pretend to be a curmudgeon, right? And sometimes he does a pretty good job of it. You think he's real? You think he's being sincere in being a curmudgeon?
Exactly. It's in some ways it's all a facade, because we know he's a sweet, warm, and loving guy inside.
But speaking of Mensches, my favorite name for the second gentleman is actually First Mensch.
I like that, Richard.
Can we go with that? Yeah,
we can go with that. You look at the administration and the number of prominent American Jews who have a role in the administration, and it just goes to show you from how far we've come in this country. Give bigotry no sanction. President Washington, when he visited the Toro Synagogue in Rhode Island, I want to say 1787, could be getting the date wrong there, whatever year he visited, and in the distance which the American Jewish community has come in this country. And I participated in a great program called Real Talk, which is every once a month Urban League program, and we were talking about issues of race, and we all have very different narratives when it comes to it, right? And one point I pointed out was the Jewish connection to the United States has a very different narrative than the African American connection to the United States, right? And the opportunity for each of us to try to explain, we can't live the African American experience. no chance. To do anything would be presumptuous. But we have to try to learn, right? Particularly in this day and age, and we get the trial beginning, jury selection is underway, and this is a seminal event for the African American community in the history of Twin Cities, Minnesota, the region, and the whole United States. We have to be very respectful of that.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Along those lines too, and I'm sorry I'm monopolizing this conversation.
No. It's well worth
something
it.
that we've been deeply involved with has been the 100th anniversary commemoration of the lynchings in Duluth of Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee, which is one of the most heinous acts that you can ever imagine. People associate racial terrorism with the South. Well, no. Here it was in June 1920, and the lynching of the 3 Duluth circus workers. It's something that we have to remember. So we have a whole series of events in conjunction with many important organizations and the Federal Court of Minnesota Chief Judge Thunheim and Jerry Blackwell and all the folks, Judge Susan Richard Nelson, Tom Nelson, the former chair of the Minnesota State Bar Association, all involved in the activities. Where the highlight of it will be, amongst a number of highlights, is Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative and all of his work in the opposition to the death penalty, and one of the great figures of civil rights in the United States, providing a keynote address for it. Our little piece of it is we're putting together an anthology of essays and greetings and the like that will hopefully give sort of an ongoing written form to the commemoration. But I commend it to you because it's a community event at remembering what happened in Duluth, to try to, where did we start this conversation with the idea, where it's not our obligation to perfect the world, but we can't desist from the effort to teach this history, to try to make us better going forward.
That's a wonderful way to begin to sum up the time we have together here and what you've shared with us. Do you have any final statement you'd like to make about looking toward the future in a positive way? I've been really struck by how grateful so many Jews are for being in this country. I've been really struck to hear that message so many times. I'm really struck by the mutually positive relationships that you have fostered with virtually every other ethnic community in the Twin Cities area. And I know you've done it elsewhere as well.
Right, and keeping in mind North Dakota and South Dakota too.
Yes,
I will say something that makes us proud, if you don't mind. An award that we received from the United States Attorney's Office for our work in engaging all communities in the protection of houses of worship. It's called the Pursuit of Justice Award, and we received it from the United States Attorney, now former United States Attorney Erica McDonald, this fall. But I say it not because it's a JCRC piece. I say it because it's a reflection of the entire community and law enforcement community and various communities with whom we've worked, to underscore your point, Richard, that there is so much tremendous goodwill, but we got to give back. We got to help the community, right? This, as you say, the mutuality, the reciprocity is what makes America work. Alexis de Tocqueville, in his visits to the United States in the 1830s, what did he note most about the United? One thing he noted was Americans' almost primal need to join voluntary organizations.
Right,
he was talking about this 200 years ago, right?
And that's that another theme we could talk about another time is civil society. JCRC is a very important institution in civil society, and you work with other voluntary organizations that are also very important. Steve, it's been a real pleasure.
Well, Richard, thank you.
A joy, and I've always valued the time we've had when I've had a chance to chat with you. I ask a question in a meeting, and just hats off to JCRC and to you as well, and of course to the curmudgeon Ellen Miller.
Well, we should all be safe and well, right? And
yes, we should. Thank
God
you so
willing,
much.
before long, we'll be together in person. Okay.
You bet. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
Pleasure.